What are the major issues, facing media buying in Africa?
There are various elements which you could look at. One of the obstacles is knowing your markets and actually understanding the local colloquialism per se. Don't just expect to go in there and be brash and have a European ad on the TV. Actually understand what the people are about, and you'll be welcomed.
And localize it. We just had a segment earlier where we're talking about localize, versus globalize.
Correct.
I think people buy into that a lot easier.
Very
so
much
if you look
so.
at all the different countries, what are the challenges? Surely there's different challenges in every country, and can you shed some light on that and share some experiences?
Yes, I mean every country is very different. If you look at Nigeria, very different animal to say a Botswana or a Mozambique. So you have your language barriers, you have print quality issues. When you start looking at outdoor, you've got to bear in mind that your faces are actually stolen sometimes. If you want light on your outdoor, you've got to put a generator at the bottom of the board with the guard so the generator is not stolen. Sometimes if there is electricity going to the board, people try and steal the electricity.
But what does that do to your cost though? Surely that's a hell of an increase on your cost.
It does, but compared to South African media, African media, I wouldn't say in every country, if you exclude Nigeria and Kenya, is still very, very affordable.
Right.
Whereas if you're looking at an average spot on television in South Africa, it could average anywhere up to 100,000 Rand.
Sure.
In say a Botswana, you're looking anything from 2,000 Rand to 3,000 Rand.
Okay.
Yes, it is linked to your reach, but it's still very much a growing market, and spend-wise still very acceptable to get into these markets.
Patrick, you've had some experience in Africa. Would you like to share some of that with us?
Yes, well, Jackie, I went on some business to Nigeria and Cameroon, and we were talking earlier about how the proliferation of outdoor, a lot of outdoor, and obviously you just discussed some of the pitfalls, obviously, of outdoor and what gets stolen and what remains. But I wasn't didn't see much television. But what would be the main medium that you'd say works best in Africa? Is it still radio? Is it outdoor?
Predominantly in a lot of these countries, radio always was the predominant medium. What we're finding in the research that is coming through is that television is starting to overtake radio. So I think it's about accessibility to electricity, houses being able to actually afford to buy televisions, and you're seeing a big growth there. Outdoor is still a very main medium in Africa. In some of the countries, if you're not seen on outdoor, you're not seen as a stable brand.
Right,
So
interesting that.
Yeah,
But talk about TV, and some of the countries still have terrestrial deals as far as the TV networks go. And from a political point of view, is that not a challenge? Does that not pose a challenge as to what you can and what you can't do on those particular channels?
Not really. I think on a lot of these television stations, they're so open to actually helping you to get what you actually want. It's not as prescriptive as what South Africa is, what you can and you can't do.
Oh, right.
As long as you have the local relationships, the world's your oyster in Africa. You can do a lot.
Okay.
Is it from a creative perspective, Celia, is it better to produce the commercials locally with a local agency and then obviously take the media company suggestions from there, or are still a lot of brands taking a global perspective and producing a commercial in isolation and then exporting it through the channels throughout Africa?
I would say about 6 or 7 years ago, that was the outlook, where you had pan-regional clients who were doing one television commercial and playing it within a number of different countries. What has happened, it's all become about me and not we. So a Kenyan doesn't want to see a Botswana person in their ad.
Right.
It doesn't appeal to them. So you're finding a big shift to become very much like South Africa. It's all becoming about what we are, what we stand for, what is our culture, what are our different languages, and speak to me, don't speak to we.
Right, very interesting. Another challenge that we could maybe talk about is research, because research is quite a challenge in the rest of Africa. So when it comes down to measuring your return on investment to your clients, how do you go about that?
It's a very tricky one. When I started in Africa, about 12, 15 years ago, there was no research, and we started an organization called PAMRO, Pan-African Media Research Organization, where we've been encouraging companies to actually try and go into Africa and start research.
Okay.
We're currently doing 22 different countries, which now has research, and it's helped out SAF as well. SAF normally flies someone in and helps out. So we are getting those mechanisms up and running. When you talk about return on investment, it's a different kettle of fish. It's all about how you measure and how it's adding to the brand. One of the campaigns which I ran for one of my clients, we did a mobile competition, and it far outweighed the response than what we would have in South Africa. The amount of response we had was just fundamentally awesome. The return was that much greater. But if you're saying television, it's all about recognition, your brand awareness. Those measurements are still very few and far between.
Let's look at some of the opportunities. What would you say are some of the opportunities and some of the trends?
As I say, TV, very much one of the dominant mediums coming through.
How about mobile?
Mobile, very much so. Some of the things which I think people have to look out for on mobile in Africa, we're seeing the shift here in South Africa, but in Africa it's been there for a while. People will have 2 or 3 cell phones, and they'll use one to enter a competition and then not use it for a long time. They'll have one for business. They will also use cell phones which are on the side of the road. So when you go back and you say you've actually won a competition, there's no one on the other end of the line because it's a common mobile line. One of the other trends, innovation, as though a lot of innovation is very limited in Africa. I think it's gaining momentum, and I think that's where the opportunity is, about standing out. Experiential wise, I think Africa has been very dominant, but different ways of using experiential is coming through.
Patrick, any final thoughts?
Well, I was just keen on to find out about the internet. I mean, now that it's available on the phone, and mobile is very big in Africa, any mobile technology, and it's the fastest growing, isn't it? Is there a swing to doing more of that? Capturing anything on the mobile phones, any sort of SMS type marketing?
There is SMS type marketing. When we talk about mobile, I'll say there's definitely strength there. When we talk about internet, still very, very small. Although the new broadband is lines are going into Kenya, so I think we might see a shift on the East African side. West Africa, still very small penetration.